Welcome to Truther Raps, and in this episode, this might be a feature. I think one of the features, one of the kinds of episodes is going to be a song title, or rather, song title, a song analysis of some sort, whether it be just a verse like with Swordbox, or even just part of a verse with that one, or the full song like Venom, where you can see that I can do 44 minutes on Venom and kind of just cover it and not even really cover a lot of the stuff that I even mention, like sort of just go autopilot on sort of the end of the third verse, because at that point, pretty much covering what I had thus far, it kind of led into just the end of that verse being kind of obvious and pretty much going right along with what I was saying about the rest of it in terms of what it was saying. But even 44 minutes feels like the ending was maybe a little rushed in that one. I don't think ultimately I think it was perfect. Like I think how it came out was how it wanted to come out maybe, but it still seemed like I was going faster through part of that than I was the other parts. So a whole song, a song analysis or like lyrics analysis in general, like that would be one thing. Like lyrics analysis, particularly, I guess maybe for a song or part of one. Then this one, which is if a rapper were a poet or something like that. And then perhaps I'll do lists, such as, for example, like most lyrically coherent rap albums in terms of like, how well the stuff on the rap album fits together and makes one coherent whole, like whether thematically or sort of as spokes around like one central idea, such as with the album Damn by Kendrick Lamar, or sort of like a persona kind of thing, like in the album The Infamous by Mobb Deep, where they're sort of just filling out a persona of like these rough and tumble guys down in Queensbridge, and like this is the album where they're basically, it's like a character study of both of them, Havoc and Prodigy, or the Prodigy anyway. Or going back to Damn, it's like these are the things that are going through Kendrick's mind. Like these are his sort of states of the union on all of these different topics. And these are the things that are sort of like coming to the surface in his last moments on Earth. And like each of them is like a huge topic, like the child abuse that he went through and fear and how that has affected him throughout his life. Or like, the song where it's like, this is what God feel like, where he's talking about like the feeling of like being materially successful. And it's like, step up to the bank, like, hey, like, like sort of the heavenly feel of like having a lot of money, maybe, or something like that. Like all these things that are happening in the last moments of his life. That album works very well, and I think those two albums might mention if I do a video like that, or maybe just other lists, various ideas like top five best story albums or best concept albums, a little more specific, like it literally is a concept album. Damn, I would say, sort of works as a concept album. The Infamous, it seems maybe like partially, see, that's that territory, a concept album versus a lyrically coherent album. It seems like there might be some merging in the center there, but there doesn't have to be. Um, But then, perhaps, like I'll talk about an artist's discography and like lyrical themes in the work of a given artist, like Eminem, for example. Like the themes of, like, for example, how Eminem has talked about his mom throughout his career, from like the early days where he's in Brain Damage, where like she's in part of the song and like she's physically abusing him and like he confronts her about it, all the way to Headlights in the Marshall Mathers LP2, where he's saying like, I love you, Mom. Like, even though all of this stuff happened between us, like, I still feel very deeply and affectionately about you in various ways. It's like there's very interesting stuff to look at there. And I think a rapper's discography might have similarly substantial territory to looking at a poet's bibliography, or to looking at the work of, someone else. Like, themes throughout a writer's work. But in this one, and I think this may be a series because I like this idea, but in any case, in this one, it is if a rapper were a poet. And this one might come out of left field for some people, but I think it's actually very apropos, and that would be Jay-Z. If Jay-Z were a poet, W.B. Yeats. William Butler Yeats and Jay-Z. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, I don't think people talk about Jay-Z a lot in this sense, but I think he really does fit this sense. But from what little I've seen, it does seem like people talk about W.B. Yeats in this sense. That's the sense of the otherworldly music of their lyrics. And I don't mean like the necessarily Jay-Z's rapping of it, although his rap performances of the lyrics work well in this sense as well. But I mean like the lyrics themselves, the poetry of W.B. Yeats and the lyrics of Jay-Z. They both have oral qualities that are very otherworldly, that sound kind of mystical, that sound kind of Illuminati in a sense. Like they sound like they're kind of like coming from like a deep reservoir of like spiritual power, and like they sound sort of off kilter. They sound strange. So let's look at a famous poem of W.B. Yeats, The Second Coming. Actually, no. Let's look at yeah, okay. Tread on them softly, you tread on my dreams. Okay, let's do that one first. You tread on my dreams. Uh, yeah. Oh, that's weird. That seems like kind of a Mandela effect, because I think he wishes for the cloths of heaven was what I remembered it as, but it says aid, AEDH wishes for the cloths of heaven on poets.org. And I have a W.B. Yeats collection, I think with this poem in it, and I don't know if I've ever seen it as aid wishes for the cloths of heaven. That's kind of weird. Possible Mandela effect? I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so this is sort of a shorter W.B. Yeats poem, and then let's do something sort of. You know what? Actually, there are a couple examples I specifically know of. So, Mr. Carter by Lil Wayne featuring Jay-Z, and then let's just do the lyrics on the Google search. And then also, this is going to be another Jay-Z feature verse from after a lot of his best work. Both of them are from after a lot of Jay-Z's best work, but this one, the other one being from the Carter 3 by Lil Wayne, sort of later 2000 zeros. This one, I think earlier 2010s, is from, or later 2000, even later 2000 zeros would be from My Beautiful Twisted Dark Whatever Fantasy, and particularly it's on the song So Appalled. Okay. I'm so appalled. Okay. So I'm going to read, oh, is this public domain? Themes, public domain. Oh, good, it is, okay, I'm going to read out the whole W.B. Yeats poem. I almost said verse there. And then let's compare it to the sounds of some of Jay-Z's lyrics. Okay. And another one from Jay-Z actually is Renegade. The one where Eminem supposedly kills him on his own shit, so says Nas and many others. But I would say, so say Nas and many others, I would actually say Jay-Z wins on the song Renegade. And it's part of the reason why these days I prefer Jay-Z's verse would be that Jay-Z's verse actually has some really interesting sonic texture to it, whereas Eminem's verse, it's got a lot of cool, intense stuff in it, and it works well. It works well in terms of his flow, of course, like he was really rattling things off, but I think it comes off a little more like his verse on Forever, where it sounds like he's got a fine flow, but he's not saying all that much, comparatively anyway. It doesn't seem quite as much there for you to explore as the Jay-Z stuff in that song, especially sonically. So, okay. This is weird, Aid Wishes for the Cloths of Heaven by W.B. Yeats. Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths, of night and light and the half-light, I would spread the cloths under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. Perfect example. Now, reading through that poem, and it is in the public domain, it seems to be, so I can read it as many times as I want. I don't even have to say anything about it. But reading through that poem, legally, I mean, reading through that poem. Okay, so reading through that poem, what you see is none of the lines, like pretty much none of the lines, maybe more towards the beginning they kind of do, but none of them quite conform with where you think they're going. As opposed to a song, as opposed to a poem by like Robert Frost, such as The Road Not Taken or Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, where it very much rolls out in a way that sounds pretty natural. It rolls out in a way that sounds very organized and very beautiful, but still very sort of structured and even regimented. In this song, or I thought to say in this album, in this poem by W.B. Yeats, in this poem, it actually doesn't, like, it sounds like it's sort of a little halting. It sounds like it's sort of stopping and starting in different places than you think it might. And so it's a little more awkward, such as Jay-Z in Renegade saying, "I'm awkward, I box lefty." And I think in that sense, if he's not specifically there talking about it, I think he might be, but if he's not specifically talking about the sounds of his rapping and writing, like similar to Ghostface Killah saying, "I come with shit that's all types of shapes and sounds," and even in the Wu-Tang Manual, RZA talks about that line as to say, like, Ghostface Killah has a lot of like different rap styles, and he brings a lot of sounds and stuff into his rap. He's not like a U-God, where it's an awesome, I like U-God's flow, but it's a pretty similar flow between songs. With Ghostface Killah, he might be doing this, he might be doing that, he might be doing anything. With Jay-Z, it's not quite so much that he might be doing anything, although he does say in the Black Album, one of the verses on there, he says, "Got so many different flows, this one's for this song." It doesn't seem so much like he has different flows, although I think he does have more creative and more varied flows than a lot of rappers as well. It really is more, he sounds a little awkward. "I'm awkward, I box lefty." I would say that line could work if it's not specifically intended to in the verse. It could also work, at least, to describe how Jay-Z's lyrics sound. And so, like, let's do the first 4 lines of that 8-line poem here. "Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light." So there you go, enwrought with golden and silver light. It's not, you might have heard it in my voice. I thought to say enwrought with gold and silver light, which changes the meaning a little bit too, because golden and silver light sounds a little different than gold and silver light, as if there are 2 different colors of light. Golden and silver sounds like it's sort of golden and silver at the same time, but it's all the same light. But in any case, enwrought with gold and silver light sounded like the more natural, the more metered, perhaps the more iambic, maybe, if that's correct here, pentameter for the verse. But W.B. Yeats doesn't do stuff in strict meter, or at least the meter that he tends to use isn't like stress, unstress, stress, unstress, stress, unstress. Like, with the term golden instead of gold, it sounds like there's an extra little sound there. The en at the end of it sounds like it's a little extra clutter in the line, but it makes the line sound that much more beautiful and that much more strangely shaped as a form of poetry. So again, "Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light," as opposed to "Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with gold and silver light." That second one, which isn't the way he has it here, doesn't that sound a little more natural, or at least a little more what you were expecting rhythmically? No, it's not enwrought with gold and silver light, it's enwrought with golden and silver light. There's a little extra stutter there with the golden instead of the gold before the and. Okay. "The blue and the dim and the dark cloths." There you go again. This is the 3rd line. In a more normally written poem, you might say "the blue and dim and darker cloths," or something like that. But in any case, the beginning of that, it says "the blue and the dim and the dark cloths." It would sound more natural to have "the blue and dim the blue and dim and dark cloths, like a more up, down, the blue and dim. But it's the blue and the dim. It sort of goes off in a little bit of a the blue and the dim. It sort of goes off in like multi jointed line there rhythmically. Okay, so the blue and the dim and the dark cloths, and that sort of it ends in a weird place too. That's another thing about both Jay-Z, or at least parts of Jay-Z. I think rap works a little differently here, like the end of a line versus the end of a line in rap. I think depending on your emphasis, you can make the middle of a line sound more like a little bit of an ending there. Whereas with a line of poetry, given that it's on the page, it feels more of a piece. Perhaps. I don't know. I might think about that more or talk about that more later. But the blue and the dim and the dark cloths, it sounds like it's ending in a strange place. Because, well, it's ending in a repetitive place. Had I the heavens embroidered cloths. By the way, clothes would have a more substantial sound, but he said cloths. Cloths has sort of a wispier sound at the end. So that word choice in itself is interesting. And cloths is different from clothes. Cloths are more components of things, whereas clothes are like what different components might have gone into to make a full finished product. The cloths are really just the means or the materials. And it sounds like W.B. Yeats in this is sort of working with the means of sounds, the materials of sounds, rather than giving you like the stitched up presentation that you might get in more of a Robert Frost or even more of an Emily Dickinson as kind of a medium between Yeats and Frost here kind of poem, in terms of like the presentation feeling like it's all tied up nicely with a bow, sonically or meterically. But the blue and the dim and the dark cloths. So first line ends with cloths, third line ends with cloths. In a more regular poem, you would have cloths and then soths, or whatever might rhyme with cloths. Or you'd have clothes and then moths, whatever might rhyme with clothes or sort of rhyme with clothes. But in this, it's cloths and then repeating cloths. And there's sort of a repetition there. And the repetition, I think, actually kind of makes the cloths sound a little more mundane, like he's reusing the damn word in that he used at the end of the first line, at the end of the third line. So it's not even just in the third line, it's at the end of the third line. So it's in the same place, he's just reusing a word. It's like, how cheap is this word? Well, how cheap are these cloths? You might not think that goes into it, but I think psychologically that sort of affects what the connotations of the very words he is using are. But in any case, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light. So there you go. There's more repetition. Night, and the way night, like, so basically and so just sort of kind of blandly, kind of like directly, like unimaginatively perhaps, rhymes with light. That adds an interesting affect to it as well, sort of like a childlike or very simple and workmanlike affect, similar to the cloths. Like, just, these are just materials he's working with. It's not even the finished product. It's like, this sounds very workmanlike. It sounds very humble, very plain even. Okay. Of night and light and the half-light. It sounds sort of Oliver Twist in a way, but the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light. But there you get a repetition again, literally in one line now, right after the line that ended with cloths, where the first line ended with cloths. Now you have one line, and not a very long line either, using the word light 2 times in a row, sort of rhyming within the line, but it's like you're rhyming just one word with one word, similar to, was it like Timbaland, who rhymed, I don't think it was like vacation with vacation, but it was something like similarly funny to that. But okay. And people like mocked him for it, but clearly, this is a serious poet, and this is one of his more famous and I think probably celebrated poems, W.B. Yeats and Aid Wishes for the Cloths of Heaven. That's pretty good. He's highly respected, and he's using repetition like that. I think that's a case where someone might know so little about poetry and stuff that they assume, or at least they say, that just using repetition means a line is bad. I'm not saying the Timbaland line was necessarily good, but it's not necessarily bad because he uses repetition. He might be using repetition in a really effective way. But in any case, and it is sort of, it's also like, in rap, this line rhymes with that line, and then the end of this line rhymes with the end of that line, rhymes with the end of that line. It's actually a little more avant-garde to have a repeated word at the end of two different lines that are supposed to rhyme together. That's kind of a curveball. That kind of seems a little more artsy, given that it doesn't often happen that way. If you're just doing that over and over again, then it might sound like you're being kind of lazy, but who knows? I don't know. Anyway, in this, I would spread the cloths under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. Feet with feet, dreams with dreams. He's throwing curveballs all over the place. Again, it's a lot of repetition. It sounds like the character, it really works together to add a really humble and kind of bare aesthetic to the character. He's talking to like a lover. I actually had a teacher tell me once that like he said these lines to his wife, and like it was a very romantic thing to say to her, like, I have spread my dreams under your feet, tread softly because you tread on my dreams. It's sort of a beautiful line, and it really casts the speaker as this sort of like, I'm just a poor man, but I have my dreams, and I have laid my dreams out for you. Will you take me and my dreams as like my presentation to you to be my partner or my wife or something, But there's so much repetition here. Feet rhyming in the fifth line with the end of the seventh line, and not only feet and not only your feet, but literally under your feet, the end of the fifth line, under your feet, the end of the seventh line, and then my dreams, the end of the sixth line, my dreams, the end of the eighth line. Not only that, though, dreams is in the seventh line, and tread softly, spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly is sort of referencing like her feet, so that's in the eighth line. That's sort of an echo of your feet in the seventh line and your feet in the fifth line. It sounds like there's a lot going on here in this 8-line poem, and it really is all coming together very coherently. There you go, the idea of coherence in the lyrics, or in this case in the poetry, very coherently to really contribute to a certain aesthetic. This aesthetic being sort of the Aladdin type character, the poor boy with big dreams, like Macklemore. We got big, big dreams. The poor boy with big dreams who's presenting himself to a possible woman, like a woman that he might possibly have a relationship with, and saying, this is what I've got for you. Are you going to follow me and follow me with my dreams? And maybe they haven't materialized yet, but they are dreams and I'm laying them out for you. And given that it's written about so eloquently and seemingly so sincerely by this great poet W.B. Yeats, or at least this very prominent and famous poet, and probably somewhat rich as far as poets go in his day, like the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s for when he was writing. I'm not sure when his work necessarily came out over time, but, if W.B. Yeats seems to be presenting this as if it's sort of a legitimate thing, then perhaps it isn't so crazy for the woman to say, okay, yeah, you do have dreams and you actually seem sincere about them. Everything in your little presentation is working together. Even the words you use are really contributing to a whole aesthetic here. I will go with you, kind of thing. Basically, I don't know if I've so much illustrated something about W.B. Yeats' style as much as kind of analyzed the poem itself here, but saying what I have, I've talked about how repetitive the sounds of this are. Like, it's the same words over and over. It's all in a short space, and Jay-Z has a lot of good compression in his verses as well. It's all in a short space. I mean, Jay-Z does like however many bars people usually do, but it does feel like Jay-Z packs a lot into his rhymes so that the stanzas themselves are little units and stuff like that. But, using his words and also using, again, his very halting meter. Let me go through this again. It's a very halting meter. It sounds like it, if you were reading Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, it would be like da 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 duh, 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 duh. And the rhymes at the end of like the third and the first line, and then at the end of the fourth and the second line, they would rhyme like perfectly, perhaps with each other. And the rhythm would be very formulaic. Well, not necessarily formulaic, but it would be very regular, probably. But in this, the rhythm is not regular at all. It's very messy, but in its messiness, and W.B. Yeats, I didn't really get how good his stuff was as immediately as I got how good some of the stuff by Robert Frost was. And by the way, Robert Frost uses a lot of interesting, I don't want to cast him as just a sort of like sing-songy kind of poet. He uses a lot of interesting meter and stuff as well, particularly from what I've seen more in his blank verse stuff, but also within his more regular sounding poems. But let's read through this because this has very odd sounds to it. It is very awkward. I think Jay-Z described the kind of sounds that W.B. Yeats has in his song Renegade over there, or Renegades. It is Renegade, singular, right? Yeah. It says here on the Genius thing anyways. Jay-Z Renegade lyrics. Right above the Styx lyrics for their song Renegade. Okay, so I'll read you the first 8 lines, which might be a whole verse from Renegade, and hear the sounds of that and compare them to the sounds of this, or a similar amount of that anyway. Okay, to this. So listen to the sounds and listen to how irregular it sounds, and then how irregular Jay-Z stuff sounds. In fact, I'll do you one better. Let's do a verse from Without Me by Eminem and stopping and maybe Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Sort of as the what's his name character. Fox Mulder in Californication, though, the actor for Fox Mulder says in Californication, his daughter picks him out like a Robert Frost poem to read, and she picks Nothing Gold Can Stay, and he's like, oh, you're giving me lesser Frost? It's like, okay, that poem may not be his greatest work, but nevertheless, I think it illustrates well the idea of how regular something sounds. Or I could go with something different, like something from Edgar Allan Poe, who has a very regular thing as well. In fact, Edgar Allan Poe poetry. Edgar Allan Poe poetry. I think this is going to be what we want to go with. Not Annabelle Lee, but okay, Eulaloom. Yeah, okay, this is a good one. So I'm gonna compare and contrast, let's say, the third verse from Without Me to um, the sounds of this. And it's going to be, one of them is going to sound very metrically regular, I predict, uh, for the Edgar Allan Poe poem, specifically in the Eminem verse. And whereas the Jay-Z verse and the W.B. Yeats ones are going to sound, or the W.B. Yeats poem, these are going to sound, or 8 lines from the Edgar Allan Poe poem, these are going to sound kind of awkward, kind of they box lefty. Okay, so this is the W.B. Yeats. Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, inwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light, I would spread the cloths under your feet. But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. Now that sounds very delicate. Those sounds are very fragile. If you read through that in a certain way, it feels like you want to read through it very softly to get the sounds of the poem. Now, let's do Renegade lyrics. Maybe I'll do the beginning of Jay-Z's second verse here. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, this is it. This is it. Okay. This is the perfect encapsulation of this point, similar to the W.B. Yeats one. I had to hustle, my back to the wall, ashy knuckles, pockets filled with a lot of lint, not a cent. Got a vent, lot of innocent lives lost on the project bench. What you hollerin'? Gotta pay rent, bring dollars in. By the bodega, iron under my coat, feelin' braver. Do rag wrappin' my waves up, pockets full of hope. Do not step to me, I'm awkward, I box lefty. An orphan, my pops left me, and often my mama wasn't home. Beautiful. There are so many flows. I've got so many flows for this song. There are so many little distinct flows just within what I read there. There are so many different little rhyme schemes. Hustle with knuckles. A lot of lint. Pockets filled with a lot of lint, not a cent. And pockets has a similar sound to lotta and nada. Okay, so had to hustle, ashy knuckles, lot of lint, not a cent. Got a vent, lot of innocent lives lost on the project bench. So there was the first one, but now he's going with the second one, which is its own not only rhyme, but also its own metrical scheme. Lot of lint, not a cent, as opposed to had to hustle, ashy knuckles. There's a different there's a different little sound there. There's a different little rhythm there. So had to hustle, ashy knuckles. Then lot of lint, not a cent. Got a vent, and also a lot of lint, not a cent. So the a lot of lint one had a little of an extra sound there. So it adds a little messiness to it. And then not a cent, it takes away the extra part. Got a vent, still takes away the extra part. Lot of innocent lives lost. Lot of innocent. So now it's sort of going off the metric, but there are enough of the same sounds and there's enough of the same pattern where it sounds like he's sort of improvising and kind of soloing on the metrics that he already had. Okay, on the project bench, so a lot of innocent lives lost, so he's sort of going out of control there, doing a little guitar solo. A lot of innocent lives lost, sort of not as so much losing the metric or so much losing the meter, the rhythm of the sounds, the stresses versus the unstressed syllables, as much as leaving the meter where it is and kind of playing with it, but still keeping it intact. So he's not messing it up, but he is playing around with it. But then he returns at the end of this third line, he returns to the same basic meter on the project bench. So a lot of innocent lives lost on the project bench. What you hollerin'. But hollerin', the sound of it actually goes a little faster than the project bench. Project bench sounds like it takes a little longer to say than hollerin'. So, but it still has the same amount of syllables, but it just sounds a little faster. It sounds a little slipperier. But project bench, what you hollerin'. Gotta pay rent. So he actually sort of like inverts the end of that. Gotta pay rent rather than project bench. Gotta pay rent. Project bench. Gotta pay rent. It's different. He's messing it up a little bit. Bring dollars in, but that goes back to it. Gotta pay rent messes it up, but then he does go back to it with dollars in. And by the way, bring sounds similar enough to bring, bench, in, bring. It's still kind of similar. By the bodega. So now he totally switches it up. And not only does he switch it up, but he literally changes the scene, or he zooms in on a different part of the scenery. If the project bench is still the part of the same scene as the bodega, still, he's situating you in another scene right after. Right now, he lets go of the project bench. Dollars in, holler in, not a cent, lot of lint. He lets go of that completely, and right as he lets go of it, like the end of it was just before this, the very beginning of the thing where he's not doing that, he sets you a whole new scene, and it's sort of a cinematic scene now. by the bodega. And also the sounds of it are a little stronger. It sounds like he's sort of standing up with this part of the line and this part of this one. By the bodega, iron under my coat, feeling braver. And so he, by the bodega, and then he kind of goes down with iron under my coat, feeling braver, and he rises back up. I mean, the sounds of this are so fucking complex. By the bodega, iron under my coat, feeling braver, do-rag wrapping my waves up, pockets full of hope. And that's so interesting because by the bodega and feeling braver flank the middle of the fifth line, which is iron under my coat, which has a totally different rhythm and different sounds and like rhymes and stuff, or different word sounds. So by the bodega, feeling braver, they go together, but iron under my coat is in the middle of them, and that sort of has a different rhythm, a sort of a slower and more awkward, more unwieldy rhythm to it. And that rhythm matches with the end of the next line, whereas the beginning of the first line matches with the first and the third part of the line before it. Or the beginning of the next line, rather, matches with the third and the first part of the line before it rhymes, or whatever. Okay, so by the bodega, iron under my coat, feeling braver. Do-rag wrapping my waves up, pockets full of hope. It's so awesome. You could really like lay this out. By the bodega, iron under my coat, feeling braver. Do-rag wrapping my waves up, pockets full of hope. Do not step and then he lets go of it again and gives you a totally new rhythm, and like a very halting new rhythm, to the point where when they write it here, they actually split up this one line, which is still like one line in terms of the time and I would say the part of the verse from the song, but they split it up into two. They say, do not step to me, and then they have the second part of it underneath it as its own line, I'm awkward, I box lefty. It's so different that the fucking lyrics website splits it up where they really shouldn't have. But I mean, it I don't know if I've ever heard a verse that more fittingly builds up to I'm awkward, I box lefty. Yes, in that in the lines themselves, he's referring to. I think he's referring to him as like temperamentally, like do not step to me. I'm awkward. I box lefty. Like don't step to me. I've been living in this like neighborhood. I've been living in this rough and tumble lifestyle for a long time, and don't step to me because I'm going to attack you. But not only I'm going to attack you, I'm going to attack you as he's sort of talking past the sale. The sale is I'm going to attack you, or at least that's already baked into the idea of him saying I'm awkward, I box lefty. So it has two messages there. Do not step to me. The implicit message of what he actually says is I'm going to attack you, but he doesn't even have to say I'm going to attack you, because he goes further than that and says I'm going to attack you in a way that you're not going to, like this is how I'm going to attack you in a way where you're not going to know. And then he goes on with that. So he totally loses the dual rhythm that he was doing with the by the bodega, feeling braver stuff and the iron under my coat, pockets full of hope stuff. He totally abandons that to say, do not step to me, I'm awkward, I box lefty. Basically, don't come and attack me, because not only will I attack you back, or don't come and challenge me, because not only will I amp things up and actually attack you for you just stepping to me, you just coming at me and challenging me, not only will I do that, he's saying here in the line, I'm not saying this to anyone, so please don't ever say that I'm saying this to anyone, and you can look into me getting a federal conviction for using words to know why I'm saying that. But this is what Jay-Z's saying in the line, but he's basically saying, if you approach me, not only am I going to match you in your approach, but I'm actually going to take things a step forward and just attack you. And not only am I going to do that, but I'm going to do so in a way where even if you are looking for it, even if you were expecting it, and it seems to be a surprise, it's a lefty attack as well. Like it's coming from a direction you wouldn't expect, even if you were expecting an attack to be coming. Attack to come. And then this just tumble of language and this tumble of verbiage continues with an orphan, my pops left me, and often my mama wasn't home. So it's not even good enough. He's changing things so much. He's changing things up literally in the line where he says, I'm awkward, I box lefty. Like, he's been changing things up this entire verse, but then he does it again, and while he's doing it, he tells you how he's awkward and he boxes lefty and he hits you from places that you wouldn't anticipate. Right after that, instead of ending with something that is either lefty or left me, instead of ending with something that rhymes with step to me and left me, he ends the eighth line after the seventh with mama wasn't home, which does have a similar sound to awkward, wasn't home, awkward, orphan, wasn't home, awkward, orphan, wasn't home, often, awkward, orphan, often, wasn't home. That still sounds kind of similar enough to the awkward, orphan, and often there. So it still sounds like it goes together, like it still sonically fits in, and it might sonically even fit in otherwise if it didn't, just based on how skilled Jay-Z is at doing this. And by the way, not all stuff sounds this crazily integrated and this beautifully written. Like the WB8 stuff and this stuff, this is heavenly. This is really good. Am I saying this is as good as the WB8 stuff? You know what? In a certain sense, I might at least be saying, like, this is approaching the same kind of quality as that has in this. But in any case, even with him saying, I'm awkward, I box lefty, and telling you I'm changing it up as he changes it up rhythmically, he then uses the next line to say, an orphan, my pops left me, and often my mama wasn't home. It's like he even ends the next line with something that's changing it up yet again and kind of like withdrawing. It's kind of a soft ending. It doesn't end with a blocky sound. It doesn't end with a consonant that hits you. It ends with more of a, or with rather a consonant and a vowel. It ends with a vowel sound like home, oh, like an O sound rather than like an ak sound, like ak, that hits you. But oh, om, it sounds very soft. And so it's like he comes up to you, he's like, he's like, do not step to me, I'm awkward, I box lefty, and he has very aggressive sounds throughout the verse. Like there's not much soft like vowel sound stuff going on as much as like the consonant kind of sounds. But so, and he's still doing this, but he sort of pulls out the rhythm a bit, so it is a little slower and it is a little more unwieldy, so it hits you a little less directly when he says, I'm awkward, actually, when it's hit you less directly when he said iron under my coat and pockets full of hope. It does hit you a little more punchily, metrically, with him saying, do not step to me, I'm awkward, I box lefty. He is packing a lot of aggressive sounds into that, a lot of hard-hitting sounds, a lot of consonant sounds. But anyway, anymore, after that, an orphan, it sounds a little nicer with orphan. Awkward sounds harder than orphan. Orphan sounds softer than awkward does, even though they have sort of a rhyming or sort of a consonants thing going on. They sound similar, but orphan definitely sounds softer. So he goes from awkward to orphan, he softens it. My pops left me. Pops sounds a little softer to me than box. Box, it's like a K sound. Whereas pops, it ends with a P sound. That's a little softer to my ears than a K sound is. So he goes from awkward to orphan. Box to pops. Lefty to left me. It gets a little DM sound in there. That's kind of a soothing, kind of softening agent there. So lefty to left me, box to pops, awkward to orphan. And often, so it tenses up a little bit there, ratchets up again with often, but often my mama wasn't home. And there is the wasn't, kind of the hard wasn't sound there, but my mama home, my mama home. Even though the my part sounds a little more tense, the mama and the home part sound very softened. So it's like he really packs in all these like really aggressive consonant sounds throughout the verse. And he's like, don't step to me, I'm awkward, I box lefty, and he packs them in even more maybe there, to the point where, again, the formatting of the lyrics actually changed in the website, but then he softens it after that. So he's like, this is all going on, I've got all this tension inside me, and it's ready to come out and leap at you, but then he'll back up and say, well, this is why, my mama wasn't home. Like, there's a deep sadness in what I'm going through. And what I'm going through here. what I'm going through. Okay, anyway. Now, all of those weird sounds, all of that sort of, one might call it convoluted um, if it wasn't sonic so much as logical. One might call it convoluted, or say it was a story and it took all the twists and turns that his verse had taken with sound in there. One might say like that's a complicated story, but sometimes complicated stories work out really well, and sometimes complicated sounds work out really well. And Jay-Z's doing in this verse a lot of the interesting sort of like unexpected and kind of not so much dissonant as just kind of awkward sounds that W.B. Yeats does in his poem. And now let's contrast that with some of the third verse from Eminem's Without Me, which is a very poppy. I like Without Me a lot. It's from a really good album and it's good, but the lyrics are really interesting too, as Eminem lyrics usually are. And often Eminem sounds so regular and so polished and so good in terms of like the sounds of just the way his songs are put together lyrically, that similar to a Robert Frost, it may be easy enough to think, oh, Eminem's just sort of a conventional rapper. Eminem's just sort of a highly polished mainstream rapper. Robert Frost is just a very mainstream poet. A tisket, a tasket, I'll go tit for tat with anybody who's talking this shit, that shit. Chris Kirkpatrick, you can get your ass kicked. Worse than them little Limp Biscuit bastards. And Moby, you can get stomped by Obi. You 36-year-old bald-headed blank, blow me. You don't know me. You're too old, let go. It's over. Nobody listens to techno. The skies they were ashen and sober. The leaves they were crisped and sere. The leaves they were withering and sere. It was night in the lonesome October. Of my most immemorial year, it was hard by the dim lake of Auber, in the misty mid-region of Weir. It was down by the dank tarn of Auber.